La trama inicia en una celebración de inauguración de una galería artística. Tras la fiesta, una mujer llamada Susan se sienta solitaria y con un semblante triste. Más tarde regresa a su lujosa residencia, una mansión que vale millones. Susan pasa la noche en vela viendo televisión hasta que amanece. Su mayordomo le informa que tiene un paquete en el buzón. Cuando lo recibe, descubre una novela escrita por su exmarido Edward. En el ejemplar hay una nota en la que él le confiesa que se inspiró para escribirla tras su separación y que ella será la primera en leerla antes de que salga publicada en primavera. Además, le comenta que ahora está en Los Ángeles y que le gustaría volver a verla después de tanto tiempo. Al examinar la portada, Susan nota que el libro lleva por título Animales Nocturnos. Más adelante, su esposo, Houghton, llega a la casa y ella le pregunta por qué no pasó por la galería esa noche. Él se disculpa y explica que si hubiera ido, habría llegado muy tarde a su reunión de cena. Susan le responde que 15 minutos de su tiempo habrían sido suficientes para ella. Luego le pregunta por qué no se acostó con ella esa noche, y su excusa es que no quería despertarla. Sin embargo, Susan le confiesa que no durmió en toda la noche. Ella le propone ir a la playa ese fin de semana. Solo ella, pero Houghton menciona que debe volver a la oficina y luego volar a Nueva York. Susan se sorprende, pues él acaba de regresar de allí. Houghton explica que necesita cerrar un negocio y que eso requiere su presencia en la Gran Manzana. Esa misma noche asisten a una siesta en la casa de un amigo en común. La amiga de Susan, Alessia, nota que ella está tensa y sin dormir. Le pregunta si está bien y Susan comenta que a pesar de tener dinero y comodidades, aún siente que le falta la felicidad. Le indaga cómo hace Alessia para estar satisfecha en su matrimonio, a lo que ella responde que como su esposo es gay, son grandes amigos que se aman profundamente y que ella puede estar segura de que es la única mujer en su vida. Susan confiesa que ella nunca experimentó algo así con Houghton. Houghton interrumpe la charla porque debe irse a Nueva York. Susan le desea buena suerte, sabiendo que enfrentará dificultades. Más tarde, ella ingiere pastillas para dormir y empieza a leer la novela que Edward le entregó, en la que hay una dedicatoria con su nombre. La historia comienza en una familia viajando por la autopista en dirección a Texas. Tony, el padre, conduce junto a su esposa Laura. Su hija India se queja porque perdió la señal del teléfono móvil y Tony comenta que esa es la belleza del oeste tejano, sin celulares ni gente, solo naturaleza. Un tiempo después, dos automóviles lentos bloquean la vía. Tony toca la bocina, uno de los autos se aparta momentáneamente, pero luego acelera y comienza a hostigarlos, hasta que uno de ellos golpea su coche por atrás. Obligan a Tony a salirse de la carretera.
They block his path. At that moment, a man named Ray appears and asks why Tony hit his vehicle. Tony proposes going to the police to resolve the situation, but one of the men says he cannot because he has a flat tire. Tony does not believe them, and Ray tells him he should drive to verify if they are lying. Tony tries to flee, but he cannot because his wheel is damaged. Ray offers to repair the tires to prove that they do not have bad intentions. With no other choice, Tony gets out of the car, opens the trunk, and takes out the spare tire. Then, Ray advises him to take out his wife and daughter so he can lift the car with a hydraulic jack. Although a bit frightened, the women have no alternative and get out of the vehicle. Ray begins to harass India while Tony tries to stop him. Ray deals him a blow, and Tony confronts him to defend his family. After fixing the tires, the women quickly get into their car and call for Tony, but Ray and another man run toward a nearby vehicle and flee. Tony, paralyzed, watches as they take his wife and daughter away, unable to do anything to prevent it. Before she can react, they're already gone. Susan snaps the book shut, breathing hard from the intense suspense, and calls her husband, who's at a hotel with another woman. His lover grabs his arm, and Susan asks why he did not call her after arriving in New York. He responds that he did not want to wake her. Then, Hutton asks the operator to call room 31, and Susan is surprised, as that is not her usual room number. Hutton explains that his reservation was not available on his usual floor. When they arrive, the operator announces, "Room 31, ma'am." Susan is left paralyzed upon discovering that her husband is with another woman. She warns him to be careful and hangs up. In the novel, Tony remains with one of the men, Lou. This man tells him to drive, and Tony, very nervous, searches the road for his family without success. He only finds his car next to an empty trailer with no sign of them. Lou asks him to keep driving and to stop worrying, since Ray will not harm his family. Then he takes him to a dark and deserted place and abandons him there. Tony walks all night along the highway until he arrives at a house and asks to use a telephone. A police officer named Bobby detains him and begins to investigate what happened that night. He is shocked to learn Tony let the men take his wife and daughter even though he had no weapons. Near a barbed wire fence, in the middle of nowhere, Tony sees his family naked and dead on a red couch. Susan, in her reality, cries inconsolably and drowns in her own tears. She stops, thinks for a moment, and has a flashback. She remembers crossing paths with Edward in New York. He, who is also from Texas, looks a lot like Tony, but without a beard. Both attended Columbia University, where Edward was going for a scholarship interview, and Susan was doing her postgraduate studies there. They went to dinner, and Edward confessed that she was his first great love. When he tells her that she inherited the same eyes as her mother, Susan gets angry and says she does not want to look like her. Edward asks why she stopped being an artist, and she responds that she is too cynical. He tells her she underrates herself. She smiles, asks to walk him home, confessing she was also his first love. Edward looks at her and smiles. Returning to the story, Officer Bobby tells Tony that they now have an official version regarding the death of his family. His wife suffered a fractured skull. His daughter died from asphyxiation and had a broken arm, and both were intimately violated. Furthermore, they track fingerprints of his wife and daughter in the trailer where Tony found his car that night, and they are looking for the owner of the trailer. Another flashback emerges. Susan is at a dinner with her mother, who is furious because Susan decides to return to Texas and marry Edward, leaving New York. Susan's mother does not approve of Edward, whom she considers weak and of lower status. Susan tries to defend him, but her mother warns that in the future, she will be the one who regrets that decision, as Edward will not be able to offer her a life of luxury. She also tells her that perhaps she does not realize it yet, but mother and daughter are actually similar. Susan denies it, saying they have nothing in common, and her mother responds with an enigmatic phrase, "Just wait." Immediately after, Susan sends an email to Edward where she expresses that his book impacted her deeply and that she wants to meet with him. In the novel, Tony receives a message from Bobby with a photo of a suspect named Turk and confirms that he is one of the individuals, but Bobby informs him that no one has seen Turk lately. Days and months pass with zero progress in the investigation. It is noted that Tony no longer wears a beard. One day, Bobby finds Tony and mentions that 3 men tried to rob a supermarket. One escaped, another was arrested, and the third was shot. The deceased is Turk. Bobby asks Tony to identify the detainee, and at the station, Tony identifies the man. It is Lou, who left him abandoned in the desert. Lou tries to deny that he knows him, but Tony clearly reminds him of what he did to his family that night. Bobby interrogates him and asks for details about Ray and Turk. Lou claims that he does not know them. Finally, they arrest him, and Bobby tells Tony that they will charge him with murder, using his testimony and the fingerprints on the vehicles. He is convinced that Ray was also one of the fugitives, obviously, and promises that they will catch him. In her office, Susan is with her staff, who informs her about an important upcoming meeting. She seems distracted and absent. When they ask her if she could not sleep another night, she responds that she never does, which is why her ex-husband called her a nocturnal animal. She finds it striking the coincidence that Edward sent her such a violent and sad book, also titled Nocturnal Animals. The assistant asks if she still loved Edward, and Susan says yes, but that she never fully trusted him or his way of being. She confesses that she did something horrible to him and that she brutally abandoned him for Hutton, who seemed more attractive and secure. In the meeting, they discuss the possible departure of a particular employee. Susan opposes, saying they should provide him with support, as she herself had asked for changes in the company, but one of the assistants reminds her that it was she who proposed those modifications. Susan responds that sometimes changing things in that way was not for the best, which may reflect regret for having made those changes in her life. Back in the novel, Bobby drives Tony to Ray's house, where he is lurking. He tells him that Ray has no fingerprints at the crime scene and that he has a clean record, but Tony is sure that he is the culprit. They try to arrest him at the police station, but on the way, Bobby asks if he recognizes the vehicle and the driver. Ray says he knows nothing. Tony, with tears in his eyes, reminds him of what he and his friends did to his family that night. Ray claims that Tony must be crazy. They handcuff him and take him to the trailer where the assaults occurred. Tony demands that Ray tell with precision what happened that night, and Ray tries to deny it. Tony, angry, deals him a blow. And a flashback appears. Susan and Edward are still together. She reads a draft of his novel and criticizes him for not being enough. She asks him to do something more than right. Edward feels offended, and Susan tells him that she is only trying to be realistic and that he cannot predict the entire future. He responds that she is starting to look like her mother, and in the middle of the fight, they end up confronting each other. Later, at school, Susan crosses paths with Hutton, her future husband. In the novel, Bobby calls Tony and informs him that Ray was released, since there is no firm evidence against him. They meet at a cafe, and Bobby reveals that he has lung cancer and that he has a year of life left. That is why he has decided to retire and dedicate himself to helping Tony achieve justice, even if it means risking challenging the law. This will be the last case for Bobby, who cannot simply watch how a murderer is set free. A flashback shows Susan preparing to leave Edward. She tells him that it does not work because they are too different. Edward tries to convince her not to do it, but she insists on seeking a future because she does not feel happiness with him. In the novel, Bobby arrests Ray at a bar and takes him to an open field. Ray tries to protest, saying it is not legal, but Bobby does not even pay attention to him. Shortly after, an officer brings Lou, and Bobby hands Tony his pistol, as he begins to feel ill and needs to vomit.
Bobby!
Both flee running, and Bobby manages to shoot Lou while Ray escapes. A flashback reveals Susan in a clinic with Hutton. She confesses that she regrets what happened and fears that Edward will find out. Here it is revealed that she suffered a loss with Edward's baby. Hutton tries to console her, assuring her that Edward will never know. Shortly after, they see Edward crying outside his car. We realize that Edward's shy personality led him to lose his wife and his baby, and that experience was what inspired him to create Tony, the protagonist of his novel. Returning to the story, Tony, upon seeing Lou dead, screams in desperation, feeling the whole burden with intensity. The guilt for not having fought more for his family, for not having been able to save them. Bobby tells him that he is a good man and orders him to get up, because they must catch Ray. They separate. Tony drives toward the trailer. Upon seeing him, he points the pistol at him. Ray mocks him, believing that Tony has no courage, and confesses that he attacked his wife and daughter and that he enjoyed every moment. When Tony shoots him, just before falling, Ray hits him with a rod. Tony, wounded in the eye, tries to get up and looks for the exit. He blindly kicks Ray, who lies on the ground. Outside the house, Tony trips and ends up falling on his own weapon. Gasping, with difficulty breathing, he finally expires. Susan in the shower thinks of Edward. Then in bed she receives a message from him, asking when and where they want to meet. The next day she prepares for the date, removes her ring, and smiles, excited to see her ex-husband again. She arrives at a restaurant and waits for him for hours, but Edward never appears. She collapses in tears, reflecting on the bad decisions that led her to a marriage without happiness, to an empty life. Moral: do not sacrifice your values or your authenticity for appearances or comfort. Regret that arises late is a burden that can haunt you throughout your entire life. Loving with courage and being true to oneself, even if it entails risks, is the only path toward inner peace. For in the end, only the decisions you made and the stories you allowed others to tell about you remain. Now, choose one of these other summaries. What a great movie!